Ladies and gentlemen, Homus UX, and this is what Russia doesn't want you to see happening in Ukraine by the channel RealLifeLore. Yeah, this is gonna be really heavy video, I guess. This is gonna be about satellite images, as the thumbnail suggests. Yeah, yeah. I guess he's gonna compare, old photos with the current one or something like that, and show you how much difference it is. And suggesting from the thumbnail is gonna be grim, right? And especially so a certain section of the map is completely different than the other one. You see those satellite images from the night thing, where certain like South Korea is really lit, North Korea is not. Is that how it's going to be? Because seeing that would be too heavy. Alright, that's always fun. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. I love real life lore, and any channel like real life lore basically talks about ongoing events, general knowledge, things like that. Yeah, that's what we did.
It's been nearly one year now since the Russian Federation invaded Ukraine and sparked the biggest war seen in Europe since 1945. Over the past 12 months of this raging conflict, Europe has experienced more historical tremors than it had in decades beforehand. The entire world order and the way of life for hundreds of millions of people have been shuffled around in unprecedented ways. And never before has such a major conflict in human history been so thoroughly documented by satellites above. Thousands of images of the war and its consequences have been taken by commercial satellites over these past 12 months. And compiling all of them together from beginning to the present illustrates in an unprecedented way how the past 12 months have changed Ukraine, Russia, and the rest of the world forever. Before the invasion even began, images captured by satellites were sending worrying signals that the Russians were actively plotting an invasion. Across 2021 and into early January of 2022, the Russian military began building up large numbers of troops and equipment all around their borders with
Even
Ukraine.
in Belarus. So the question, will Belarus join? I guess they were always supposed to, since they were already doing that in Belarus. I mean, yeah. Okay, I guess these are the forces that entered through Belarus, not actual Belarus forces. At the start of the conflict, they did enter from that area, right?
For months, the Russians insisted that these buildups were merely routine military exercises. They insisted that the Russian military had every right to conduct exercises within their own territory, even if they were all simultaneously taking place all across their borders with Ukraine. But as time went on, the images the satellites were telling were putting the Russian narrative
Isn't that
and
funny?
intentions into
They're like,
question.
we have all the right, if you want to conduct military, exercises in our own country, and at the same time, why is NATO moving closer to our border? Are we moving closer to your border? No, but you're moving closer to us. Like other countries close to us are joining. Yeah, I guess it's their right to join. I don't know. This is just, it's something called act of aggression, right? That's the whole thing, act of aggression. Saying that this is our right kind of like doesn't work.
These are photographs that were captured by satellites over Belarus, near to the Ukrainian border just days before the full-scale invasion began. The Russians had deployed around 30,000 of their troops into Belarus, ostensibly for joint military exercises with the Belarusian armed forces. But three kinds of images began ringing alarm bells to many that an imminent invasion was coming. The first were images like this one, captured within Belarus near to the Ukrainian border, clearly showing more than 50 heavy equipment and troop transporters all lined up in a row ready to be deployed. The next were several photos like these in the days leading up to the invasion, clearly showing dozens of idling Russian attack helicopters lined up in fields and across airstrips around the Belarusian town of Shozhniki, a mere 40 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border just across the Policy State Radiological Reserve, a large swath of enclosed territory in Belarus that was most heavily affected by the Chernobyl disaster's nuclear fallout. But by far the most alarming images to analysts right before the invasion were ones like these. This image was captured within Russia in the town of Krasnaya Yaruga, the day before the invasion took place, clearly showing a freshly deployed field hospital less than 10 kilometers away from the border with Ukraine. It was far from the
when you
only
deploy a
one.
field hospital, come on, it's really hard to defend that. You don't need a field hospital when you're doing some exercise or something. You're not gonna be concerned about, hurt soldiers here and there. So clearly they are about to invade. That is the evidence that you need at that point.
This was another image taken within the occupied Crimean Peninsula a couple weeks before the invasion, showing troop tents and additional field hospitals set up. Here's another image from right before the invasion, clearly showing the deployment of yet another field hospital by the Russians in the town of Norulia in southern Belarus, less than 30 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. If the Russians were only carrying out routine military exercises like they
why
claim,
are they yellow
then
though?
why would
I don't know. Did people forget the importance of camouflage? If you don't want other people to know what you're doing, wouldn't it be better to somewhat some shade of green or a bit black, so it's not that obvious like what it is? Like all these images, I can suddenly, it's like, where's Waldo? I can suddenly, oh, there's the field hospital. You can clearly see it.
they constructing so many field hospitals to care for a large amount of wounded soldiers at several different points along the border with Ukraine? The answer, of course, was because they were planning on using those field hospitals to support their invasion that would come in the next few days. On the 24th of February in 2022, nearly 200,000 Russian soldiers from all around Ukraine's borders were finally given the order to attack. One of the very first objectives of their invasion was to quickly send helicopters and airborne troops from Belarus to capture the Antonov airport within the city of Hostomel, a suburb of the capital city, Kyiv. The airport was only located about 10 kilometers outside of the city center in Kyiv, implying that if the Russians could capture it, they could use it to airlift in more troops and heavy equipment to put pressure on the Ukrainian capital. Recognizing the airport's strategic value, the Ukrainian military immediately responded to the Russian presence, and the battle that was fought over its control was fierce. Revealed in satellite images like these that show the extensive damage caused to hangars, planes, and the runway itself. Even though the Russians successfully captured it after a few days, the heavy fighting over the airport damaged it too extensively to be effectively used to fly in more troops. So without being able to use the airport, the Russians began piling their troops and equipment into trucks instead, and concentrated them into huge columns that they threw down the Ukrainian road system towards Kyiv.
All right. Look, I don't know much about warfare, obviously. I'm not some military general, but I always assumed in the modern era, when you hear about all these different advanced tech you have, all this, targeted missile, intercontinental ballistic targeting missiles, satellite weapons and shit like here and there, which is extremely accurate. Like you can be in some different continent and you can strike something really accurately. So I always assume, in Russia being one of the two top power, I always assume like before they even attempt to invade, wouldn't it make sense that all the key points they destroyed with this kind of weapons, right? All the communication things, all the airports, anything, right? All the gas depot, and just targeting that way. Or does Russia didn't have those kind of weapons, something like US does? Because I'm pretty sure I heard of a lot of different type of weapons, all the different type of drones that can be tracked, and you can just attack before anyone even knows it. So matter of hours, all the key things, all the key places would be destroyed before you even do the invasion. Why didn't they do that? Or, I guess Russia's equipment were exaggerated. Is that it? Because, I'm pretty sure there are way too many equipments like that. Way too many missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles. ICBMs are not just nuclear missiles, right? ICBMs are also, empty shells. Because they're ICBMs, they don't need a warhead in them. They can be targeted, attack, and can destroy a building size or a football, stadium size things. So why didn't they do that? I don't know.
Hundreds of satellite images captured the long convoys of Russian trucks crowded on the highways like these, slowly but surely barreling down from Belarus towards the Ukrainian capital. They had to do it this way because the Russians decided to invade the country at the end of February leading into March and the spring season, precisely the time when the snow in Ukraine is melting and rainfall begins to pick up, which turns large swaths of the countryside and unpaved roads into effectively impassable, deep, muddy quagmires. This is the very same problem that the Germans encountered when they invaded through this exact same area 80 years ago during the invasion of the Soviet Union. Russia's heavy tanks and trucks.
Not a great day for you when you're getting compared to Hitler like that. They use the same road, same place around the same time. Oh God.
quickly found themselves bogged down in the mud and stranded when they attempted to cross over the muddy fields, and that effectively limited them to bunching up together onto major paved roads within Ukraine instead. At one point, a nearly continuous convoy of Russian military vehicles consisting of around 15,000 Russian troops spanned for more than 60 kilometers between these two cities as it approached Kyiv. But concentrating onto paved roads like this made them easy targets to Ukrainian drones and partisans, because their movements were predictable and their locations were easy to spot. The 60-kilometer convoy of trucks and tanks barreling towards Kyiv quickly stalled out in a traffic jam.
You would think that they would not attack time like that, where especially equipment is really hard to transport. But I think they grossly underestimated Ukraine and how much world would help. Because they just assume that even if our movement is predictable, they are not going to do anything about it, because we are Russia, we are much more powerful. A bit of casualties here and there is going to be acceptable, right? That's what they thought. Because if they attacked it during summer or something where everything's dry, there's a chance the Ukrainians could gain an edge here and there. But this way, yes, their movement is restricted, but also is Ukrainians any attempt to, I guess, counter attack, right? Or I guess run away or whatever. But they didn't account for how Ukrainians would fight back. They didn't account for the world's help, and this turned out to be really bad, because these convoys were targeted attack at that point. Because where the convoy is going to go? They are barely moving. What are they going to just run anywhere?
Running low on fuel and food and beset by poor maintenance conditions and attacks from Ukrainian drones and partisans, they never made it to attack the capital and would eventually withdraw completely by the beginning of April. In the opening days of the war, millions of Ukrainian civilians decided to flee from the violence and escape towards safety in the European Union. This image was captured by a satellite just 4 days after the invasion began at a major border crossing between Ukraine and Hungary, showing a long queue of cars from the Ukrainian side all lined up to cross into Hungary. As the Russian military convoy inched ever closer to Kyiv across March, more and more civilians decided to leave from the city.
Look at the massive Autobahn-style highways, and they are part of a war where they're fleeing. How fucked up that is, look at that.
Kyiv on the 10th of March, showing a long traffic jam of cars all trying to leave from the capital at the same time. But the gears of history weren't making it easy for everyone in the country to escape. In the city of Irpin, another suburb just to the west of Kyiv, a crucial bridge over the Irpin River was deliberately self-destroyed by the Ukrainian military in order to slow down the Russian advance on Kyiv. Captured here in this satellite image, with dozens of cars stuck on the other side of it with no ability to cross. Today, 1 year into the invasion...
So those are the Ukrainians? They didn't know what was going to happen. It's the Ukrainian armed forces probably destroyed it. They had no idea that's going to happen. Holy shit, that's just heavy.
8 million Ukrainian civilians, 90% of whom are women and children, have left the country and become refugees across Europe, representing nearly 1 in every 5 Ukrainians before the start of the war. This represents not only the largest refugee crisis seen in Europe since the Second World War, but the largest refugee crisis seen anywhere in the world in the 21st century. And from all across Ukraine, the satellite images captured between March and June were showing very clearly what it was they were attempting to escape from. This is an image that was captured 4 days into the invasion in a residential area just outside of the Antonov airport in a suburb of Kyiv, whose name would later become infamous around the world: Bucha. People's homes are already destroyed, and burnt-out military vehicles can be clearly seen littering the streets. A few days later, just to the north of where that image was taken, this photo was captured showing armored vehicles advancing through the snow, while this image was captured of artillery pieces in the middle of firing their shells. Less than 8 kilometers away from where these artillery pieces were firing is the Ukrainian town of Moschun, where this satellite image captured on the same day shows homes destroyed and actively on fire. Further to the north of Kyiv, in the Ukrainian town of Cherniv, a shocking satellite photo reveals a large crater in the middle of an Olympic sports stadium in a residential area, the direct result of a Russian artillery shell. The city of Cherniv exists almost immediately across the border of Belarus, and is the most major city between Belarus and the Ukrainian capital in Kyiv. As a result, it was almost immediately put to siege by the invading Russian forces, and by the 10th of March, was already almost completely encircled.
You know what fucked up about this whole invasion is around Kyiv and everywhere? That these are, major cities, right? European cities with skyscrapers, right? People bustling, just, living their lives. Stadiums are there, malls and shit. People are just going about their life, and suddenly attack happens. And attack happens at people. All the townspeople are just like afraid, like what is happening, and the bombs fell on their houses. Like, what the fuck? I mean, this is all this fucked upness is like, and what's, in the future, doesn't matter what happens, people will not let, people will not let Russia forget this, because we are living in an, advanced information age, right? Where everything, there's a photo of everything, there's video, everything. There's going to be ridiculous photos and videos, satellite images of this conflict. That will be just there, right? So all the conflicts of the past, all the invasion would have been just as fucked up as this, but nobody had the, that much detailed photos and images. But this invasion, people are going to have that, right? People are going to see malls, and there are, crater there, just like the Olympic Stadium. There's going to be crater there. There's photos of just the neighborhood normally, but suddenly there's some houses on fire because a shell dropped there. There's going to be photos and videos like that. And this will remind people, like, this invasion didn't happen in borders. This is not some border fight. This invasion happened inland, in cities where people are just walking around, don't know what's happening, and a fucking shell drops, buildings get destroyed. This is really horrible.
On the 10th, a satellite
what the
captured
fuck?
this before and after photo of a shopping center in Cherniv that became a casualty of the fighting. Its roof completely burned away to nothing. But Chernihiv and Kyiv were far from the only cities and locations the Russians were attacking. Complementing Russia's ground assaults was an air campaign of missiles targeting critical Ukrainian infrastructure, like this fuel storage depot in the town of Kalinivka, more than 100 miles behind the front lines near Kyiv. On the 25th of March, a missile struck this depot and destroyed it, revealed in these images taken before and after the attack. In their drive to capture the Ukrainian capital and overthrow the government, the Russian armed forces attempted to make a blitzkrieg-style attack against it from here just to the west of Belgorod. Their plan was to try and rapidly advance across hundreds of kilometers in order to open up another front to the east of Kyiv, adding further pressures to the city and complementing their already existing front in the north. But in order to get there, they had to get through the city of Sumy first, which immediately became the site of another ferocious battle. This image taken by a satellite shows a quiet set of apartment buildings in a church in Sumy back in the summer of 2021, months before the invasion began. And then this image was taken in March of 2022 in exactly the same location. The church is now destroyed, while the apartment buildings show clear signs of damage from the battle being fought over the city's control. And this location is far from the only place in Sumy to see such devastation. In another part of the city before the invasion, we see a street intersection, residential homes, and other buildings. And then, after the invasion, nearly everything in that original photo is in complete ruins. It's difficult to find a single building here between these photos that escaped the Battle of Sumy unscathed. A harrowing difference of only a few months in time. But perhaps
imagine that, right? I remember when the first time, Putin announced like special operations or whatever, and people are freaking out in Ukraine, and invasion barely started, right? Forces literally just crossed the borders yet, and all of this, like all these people in this neighborhood probably wouldn't have any idea that this was going to happen. Look at the entire neighborhoods, looks different. Everything destroyed, trees burned out. I'm pretty sure this violates lots of international laws and war crimes and shit, because you can't just do that, right? You can't just go to a bustling city and bomb everything. This is just fucked up.
In contrast that the satellites captured over Sumy was this one. The first is an image over the central part of the city and the local train station back in 2021, when life was normal. And the second is an image over the same location just days after the city became surrounded by Russian troops several months later. In the second image, improvised tents distributing supplies to a crowd of hundreds of people now living under siege can be clearly seen, while many of the previous buildings around the square and the train station are now destroyed. Clear victims of the fighting, and a testament to how rapidly people's everyday lives can be completely turned on their head. Just 2 days after this photo was taken, another
This
image
is a
further to
reminder
the
that doesn't
southeast
matter
of
where you
Ukraine's-
live. You could think like I'm living in some modern cities with skyscrapers and shit, a very bustling city. Nothing's gonna happen here. Not true. Apparently not true, right? When war breaks out, nobody's gonna think about where I'm attacking. It's a war. It's an invasion, right? So this is just horrible. This is just scary when you really process it. Like, what if something like that happened to you where you live? What the fuck you gonna do, man? And because we live here every day in our city, and we just have this sense of safety, right? We're living in a city, in modern city. Now, what's the worst gonna happen here? You never think about an invasion or fucking shells dropping around you. Your whole neighborhood getting destroyed.
Second largest city, Kharkiv, captures the scene of a field full of artillery craters directly adjacent to a major residential area. Another before and after series of photographs taken only 1 day apart reveals the destruction of a TV and radio tower, the probable victim of a missile strike or an artillery shell. But of all of Ukraine's cities, none have been as overwhelmingly destroyed by the horrors of artillery and modern war as Mariupol. Mariupol had been a major target of the Russian invasion early on, as it was the largest city within the Donetsk Oblast they did not already control beforehand. But the city's heavy resistance against the invasion infuriated the Russian attackers, who began resorting more and more to indiscriminate and massive artillery strikes into the city to force it into submission. The aftermath of which can be clearly seen
See, the
from
fucked up,
satellite
what is
images.
pissing me off is they're selling it like these are terrorists, and the people don't want to live in these oppressions. That's what they're selling, right? How do you justify that 90% of the towns getting destroyed, 90% of the buildings, entire neighborhoods getting destroyed? So which are the terrorists? Every single person living there, those are the terrorists? Is that what you're saying? Because their official justification makes no sense when you destroy the entire towns. The only way you would destroy the entire towns is because people there don't want you there. So what your reasoning, like how we are saving the Ukraine from this terrorist and whatever, that doesn't work anymore.
This photo was taken on the 21st of June, back in 2021, several months before the Russians invaded. It depicts a shopping mall on the left and a grocery store on the right in the western part of Mariupol before the war came to the city. And this photo was taken on the 9th of March in 2022, only a couple weeks into the invasion that already shows the destruction of the mall and grocery store from artillery bombardments. And no more cars to be seen in the parking lots or on the road.
It would be even more fucked up. I don't know why, but if there was a car that were nearly destroyed because of an artillery shell, that would imply that there were people there when everything dropped. Which of course there were people there when everything dropped, but seeing the evidence of that would be too fucked up.
For hundreds of thousands here was over. As Russian airstrikes and artillery bombardments in Mariupol intensified across March, hundreds of civilians took shelter within this drama theater. This photo was captured on the 14th of March, with the theater still intact and the Russian word for children, Deity, clearly visible written out in big letters on either side of it. A visible plea to the sky not to attack the building. Nonetheless, 2 days after this photo was taken on the 16th, the theater was bombed by the Russian armed forces anyway. This photo taken days later on the 29th reveals the catastrophic damage the building suffered during the attack, with the word for children still clearly visible in the front. The Associated Press estimates that as many as 600 civilians within this theater died in this one single attack, and it has consequently been widely labeled as a major war
Oh
crime.
my god, what the fuck? So all the kids in there 600. Oh god. Man, fuck you. You know what? When they write children there and you still attack, you're an asshole. There is no justification for this. I don't care how pro-Russian you are. Don't you dare write anything in the comments. Fuck you, there is no justification for this. You didn't need to bomb that. That's just some bullshit right there. I mean, yeah, this is gonna bite Russia in the ass in long term. No way this is gonna go away. This is just horrible.
And it has consequently been widely labeled as a major war crime. Several months later, this photo was taken of the building again on the 30th of November. By then, Mariupol had been firmly beneath Russian military occupation for months. The site appears cleaned up. The words for children have been removed, and a large wall has been constructed around the entire theater's perimeter, covering up the damage and the crime from every possible angle except for the one where the bombs that did it came from: the air. But before the Russians completed their occupation of Mariupol, the city would burn and be largely reduced to ashes. Countless photos from satellites show the unbelievable extent and scale of the destruction that Mariupol has experienced. All of these photographs were taken across March, April, and May, as the Russians bombarded the city into oblivion.
Well, how fucked up it is, right? I mean, I guess they put those walls up to cover the bodies so no reporter can just walk in there after the attack and see whose bodies are there. What did you, so... And I don't remember who was that. Was it RealLifeLore? I don't know, in one of the videos, somebody talked about that if they are covering up something, if they're covering up bodies and digging a mass graves, which means they know what they're doing is wrong, which means they're admitting to war crimes, which is going to be bad moving forward. I'm pretty sure somebody said that. I don't remember. I don't think it was RealLifeLore. It was some other video or something on news I saw. But the fact that they're digging a mass graves and covering things up in international law implies that they know what they're doing. They know they are doing war crimes, and that's going to be bad moving forward. Yeah. I don't know. That thing is going to get stuck with me, right? Everybody just, those theater or whatever that building was, people are literally taking shelter in their kids and everybody. They're writing out that there are kids here and they still bomb it, right? Hundreds of people died, including kids. I don't know, man. After that, if coming years, if Russia doesn't, get major consequences because of that, I don't know. Humanity is fucked. I don't know what else to say. If you get away with all this shit, I mean, nothing's left out of that.
Moved in to capture the ruins. The United Nations would later conclude that at least 90% of the residential buildings in Mariupol had been damaged or completely destroyed during the siege and the fighting, while the Ukrainian authorities estimated that tens of thousands of civilians had lost their lives within it. This makes Mariupol the most heavily destroyed city in Europe since the Second World War, and puts it on a comparable scale to the devastation seen in Warsaw between 1939 and 1945.
Warsaw! When people compare this to Warsaw, you fucked up. You know what, I can't continue this. I'm going to continue this later or whatever, but this is just pissing me off beyond measure right now. Fuck you, man. I don't know. Yeah, my video is going to get yellow flagged because how many curses I'm doing. But this is just, that building was not among other buildings. There was dedicated different buildings. There were empty ground around it, right? Understand that you just explain that I'm attacking strategic points, and sometimes casualties happen because of that, right? Sometimes a stray shell hits somewhere. But when you have a fucking building surrounded by empty ground, not amongst other building, that building is just a hall basically at that point, where a people can hide at best. When people write that there are kids here and you still bomb it, I mean, that's not just empty shell. That these are not stormtroopers from Star Wars where they just throw this missile shells anywhere. You have to target that. What is the justification or even a tactical justification you might have to attack that building? You are clearly trying to wipe out Ukrainian civilian population. That's the only thing I can say at this point. Why would you deliberately attack that building knowing that there are civilians there? Only justification is, regardless of what you officially say, you want to kill as many people you can so everybody just out of fear surrenders. You are actively trying to kill civilians. You don't care. I don't know, this is fucked up. By this point, I don't know, I would expect some colonel, anybody in power at that point would say, like, fuck that, I don't care about the order. I'm not attacking a civilian place where there are children or kids there. And this is Ukraine. Lots of people have relatives in Ukraine and Russia and vice versa. How could you attack something like that? You would think that they would be like, okay, let's not attack a place where they literally say there are children here, right? Because that would be a bit too much on the nose, right? Let's not do this at least. And they still did it after 2 days. And they cover it up like we are not living in modern age. There are no satellites out there. That nobody's going to take a photo of that or something. This is just fucked up, man. Right, well, that was what Russia doesn't want you to see happening in Ukraine by the channel Real Life Lore. If you like my next one, don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, whatever.